Hi, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome. My name is Bryndís, and in today's video I want to talk to you about my top 5 books of 2023. The year 2023 was really a good reading year for me. In total I read about 92 books. Those were both just novels, but also several short stories. But it was like 92 in total. And I really found some really good books in there, books that I didn't know about before. And yeah, it was really, in general, it was a really good year, and I discovered a lot of new books and new authors and new kind of tropes or topics that I enjoy reading. So it was an excellent year. But in this video, so I'm just gonna, so I could easily talk to you about like 20 books that I found really good, but I decided to just kind of narrow it down to my top 5. Yeah, it's like I'm not gonna rank them, like tell you which one was my number 1 favorite, because all of these 5, they are quite different, and it's really difficult sometimes to rank books because they are so different. And like, but all of these 5 books that I'm going to talk about made an impact on me and made me really like, they really engaged me, and I just loved them so much. In 2022, I started Agatha Christie marathon. So my goal was to read everything that Agatha Christie has written. So I spent the majority of 2022 reading her books, her novels, and her short stories. And I continued to do that. Wasn't able to finish all of them in 2022. So I started the year with continuing my Agatha Christie marathon. And I finished the last of her books around mid-year, maybe May, June of 2023. In this year, I read 32 of her novels and 29 of her short stories. And I have now read all of her books, all of her novels, all of her short stories, and I've added her play, The Mousetrap, to my bucket list for when I'm next in London. I hope at least it will still be playing. I think it's like the longest running play in the West End for like ever. So I would really love to see that in London for sure. I love Agatha Christie. I had never read her books before. I had seen like the TV show or TV series with Hercule Poirot, and I've seen some of the TV shows or TV movies with Miss Marple and things like that, but I'd never read her books. So I discovered that I love her. I think there's a reason why she's so famous, right? I just think she's really good at creating characters, and even if you like the characters, even if they are not necessarily all likable, like Hercule Poirot, he is very particular in his way of doing things, and he has definitely some views about roles of people that are not necessarily something I would agree with, but he is just fascinating character. And I also like Miss Marple with her like quiet, sharp mind, Tommy and Tuppence with their kind of banter between them, the Parker Pine books, and like there are a lot of characters, a lot of side characters as well that I really liked. And I think that she's really good at, good at creating these characters. Sorry, my cat here. Anyway, so I thoroughly enjoyed her books, and I definitely can see myself rereading them again in a couple of years. There really was none of her books that I didn't like. There were a few that I gave 3 stars, so that were not necessarily my favorite. I think I gave but I think I gave the majority of them 5 stars because I just really liked them. They just really, I am very slow in solving puzzles, like solving like crime puzzles and mysteries. So I never could realize. I never saw who was who done it in her book. So that's probably why I liked it. I don't like to when I can see who did it. So anyway, I just really liked her books. But I think that I can definitely say that my all-time favorite of her books, and the first one here on my top 5 for 2023 is And Then There Were None. And I'm sure that comes to surprise to no one, right? I mean, this is an amazing book. It was first published in 1939, and of course it has a little bit of a complicated story with the title throughout the ages, but now it's called And Then There Were None, and it is just magnificent. It is. I felt like it was almost. I read it. It's the last book of hers that I read. I decided to savor it for last, and because at first I read all her series, like with all the characters, like Hercule Poirot, Miss Marple, and so on, and then the last books of her that I read were her kind of standalone novels, and this was the last book. And it felt almost like a culmination of all of her books, all of her previous books, although I don't think it's the last book that she wrote at all. And it was just perfect to savoring it for last was just perfect. All I can say is there's a reason for why this is one of, or possibly the best-selling books of all time. It's just fantastic, and I just like the characters. Even the characters that weren't very nice or likable, I still kind of liked. Like Agatha Christie, she manages to write them in a way that you kind of just like them anyway. The plot was very interesting, and the suspense and like the psychological thriller aspect of it. Oh yeah, and I definitely want to watch the miniseries that I know is up and it has been like, I don't know, for several years. I haven't seen that, so that's definitely on my list to watch eventually. But yeah, it was a really good book. So the second book on my top 5 that I want to talk about is The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton, who is an English author. This was her first book, her debut novel, published in 2014. There has since come out, been published a sequel to the book. It's called The House of Fortune. It came out in 2022. I haven't read that one yet, but it's on my TBR for sure. So The Miniaturist is a book that I was like, do I want to read this? But it's a historical novel, so I was like, yeah, I kind of do. I love historical novels, but I don't know why. I actually don't know why I started to read it. I listened to it in an audiobook, and I don't really know why. I think I was just like, I have no idea what to read. I'm just gonna read this one. So, and the first couple of chapters were a bit shaky for me. I was like, oh, this is not very engaging. Or like, what is this? But then, I don't know. It just kind of took off, and the rest of the book was very captivating for me. So the story takes place in Holland, in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, mostly in the late 17th century, so in the 1680s. And it follows Nella, who is, in the beginning of the book at least, an 18-year-old, I think, 18 or 19-year-old, who lives with her parents and her, I think, brother or another sister. And she is married, or gets married, like in this obviously arranged marriage, to a very much older man in his late 30s, a very rich trader or businessman in Amsterdam. And so she kind of moves to Amsterdam to live with her husband. And in the house there's also her sister-in-law, her husband's sister, older sister I think, and a maid that is a very interesting character, as well as a servant or kind of private secretary to her husband. And Nella gets very quickly disappointed with her marriage. I mean, she probably wasn't super enthusiastic about marrying this old man in beginning to begin with, but at least she's talking about, and her mother had talked to her about that, she will have children to, so that's kind of the point really of marriage, is obviously to have someone take care of you financially because they didn't have a lot of money, and to have children. That was kind of the light at the end of the tunnel for men, from women in general during many hundreds of years. So, but her husband shows no interest in her at all, romantically or sexually or whatever. And he really just treats her, he barely talks to her, he kind of just ignores her, and he treats her like a child, and he ends up giving her this huge dollhouse, which is has miniatures, or she buys miniature furniture and people to furnish that dollhouse, which is hence the title of the book. And we do find out later that the husband, the reason why he isn't interested in his wife is because he was kind of more or less coerced into the marriage by his sister in order to kind of save face, or even for just save his life, because he seems to have been, or he was very intimate with a young man, and those things obviously were not allowed during that time. So there's a lot of discussion in the book about religion, and this in Holland and in a lot of countries in Northern Europe during the 16th, 17th centuries, it's the height of extreme Lutheranism, Puritanism, very fanatical, you should never feel good or be happy or laugh or eat proper food or do anything good or happy in your life, because then Satan can get you or something, and then you're not a good Christian. And that is, I think it's a very realistic depiction of life. I'm sure it's dramatized as well, but for life during that time, it was very extreme. Religion had a very extreme control over your life, and Nella isn't quite there. Her sister-in-law is extremely religious, and it's a very interesting story of Nella and the mystery surrounding the miniatures, and her husband and his relationship with the young man, the maid, the sister, and her kind of backstory. It's, I don't know, she just does it in such a fantastic way that it's just I could barely put that book down. I was just so engaged, and I really obviously love to read about Dutch culture and history and Amsterdam in that period, and the Dutch were really big in trading, and of course there is her husband's private secretary is African, so there's always this kind of connection with the slave trade, and I don't know, it's just, yeah, it's a good book. I 100% recommend it, like I do all of the books that I'm going to talk about. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it, and it was excellent. The third book in my top 5 of 2023 is somewhat of a surprise for me, because it is a romance, kind of, and I'm not really a big romance fan, but the book is The Other Bennet Sister by Janice Hadlow, and it was published in 2020. Hadlow is a historian. She worked for the BBC for several years, and she has written a biography on King George III, which is, I think, has been very well received. But anyway, this book, The Other Bennet Sister, it follows Mary Bennet, who was the middle sister in the Bennet household from the book Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. And it kind of, so the first part of the book is somewhat of a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, so you can see, at least if you know Pride and Prejudice, you will know that it's taking all the events from that book, but from Mary's point of view. And then as the book continues, we follow Mary's life going forth after her sisters have gotten married and all of that. Anyway, I was so intrigued by this book when I first heard about it, because I am a huge Jane Austen fan, which is funny because, as I said, I'm not a fan of romance, but I like it when the romance isn't too idealized in a way. So marriage is idealized in Jane Austen's books because the time you had to get married if you wanted to have a proper life as a woman. But it wasn't, even though obviously there is a lot of romance and love, it's not like, I don't know, I sometimes find that Jane Austen is kind of making fun of that, but that's just kind of my feeling. Anyway, I'm a big fan of her, and Pride and Prejudice is one of my favorite books of her, and I've read it like dozens of times. I watched the BBC miniseries like almost every year. Like I love that book. I know that book by heart, and I just love it. But I've always been very curious about Mary, and I always felt really sad about her because she was so always dismissed by her sisters and by her father, by her mother obviously, and I don't know. It was just, I always felt everybody was so hard on her, and I think I also related a lot with her because I was so painfully shy when I was a teenager and a young adult. So when I went to like social gatherings, I was always a wallflower because it was just so hard for me to talk to people and like put myself out there. So I could always kind of identify with her and all the ladies who were sitting and nobody wanted to dance with. And anyway, so I felt like in many ways this book was written for me because I'd always been curious about Mary's story, and I was really interested in to kind of learn what happened with her. And yeah, so I love this book. It made me cry so hard. Oh my God. I could just feel the pain, the rejection, the disappointments of Mary, and oh my God, it's just it's just, oh my God, it's such a good book, and the author is so good at describing the pain. Yeah, it's devastating, really. And you know, it is a romance as well, and but it's just, there is so much more going on as well. And anyway, I love that book. It was so good, and I 100% recommend it as well. It was just definitely an excellent book. The fourth book on my list of my top 5 is quite different from the couple of books before. It is a classic. It is by Elizabeth Gaskell, who was a 19th century novelist and biographer, and it is her book Cranford. It was published in 1853 and takes place in this fictional small town in England, and kind of follows a few characters. I think it's been described as what is it? Like, it's not really, doesn't really have a plot. Or was it a collection of sketches? I think I read somewhere. So there isn't really one plot going through the book. It's more like, it's almost like short stories that have been put together in one book. Yeah, so let me see, I wrote it down here, I have it here. Yeah, so there's this narrator that is kind of guiding us through all of these stories. And her name is Mary Smith, and she is just kind of visiting the elderly ladies there in the village or in the town. But it's such a beautiful book, and the way Elizabeth Gaskell describes the situations of the elderly women who are living there, and they are just living in dire poverty, but it's genteel poverty, and they still have to kind of maintain this class separation, although they are not at all better off than the poor people or the peasants or anyone. They are of genteel background, so they are, they have to put up this appearance really. Anyway, there are so many of the stories are just really interesting and engaging and captivating, and I just loved getting to know these women and kind of how they are helping each other out when someone like loses kind of her money. Everybody chips in kind of to help them out, and I think it's just a beautiful story of goodness of people and kindness of people, and I really loved it. This is the first book that I read by Elizabeth Gaskell, and I know that she wrote a story, I think it's called North and South, which is like, I think, her famous novel. So that's definitely on my TBR, and I think all of her books. She wrote also a biography, I think, Charlotte Bronte, I think, rather than Emily, and so I love to read that because I've read. I'm reading Charlotte or the Bronte sisters this year, so I'm definitely gonna read that as well. So yeah, definitely a good book, and it's just it's a fairly easy read. So it isn't like very emotional, or you don't get like really strong feelings. You do feel empathy and sympathy and kind of happiness or frustration for the characters, but it's not as extreme as I felt reading the other Bennett sister, and that I felt as well reading in the next book that I'm going to talk about. The last book I want to talk about, and the fifth book of my top 5 for 2023, had such an impact on me. Oh my god, it is called Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine, and it is by Gail Honeyman, who is a Scottish writer, and it was published in 2017. It is the author's debut novel, and I think also some of the other books that I talked about are also debut novels. But oh my god, what a ride. So the story follows Eleanor, as the title suggests, who is a very like particular person living inside her little box. So she lives a very structured life. She goes to work as a kind of a secretary type of a work. Then she goes home and she drinks vodka. And like, she doesn't really have any connection with other people. She seems to be living a completely solitary, extremely lonely life. And then two things kind of happen. She starts to get, or a co-worker starts to get friendly with her at work, a male co-worker who seems to be maybe interested in her romantically, but also she sees a man somewhere in the crowd, and she falls in love with him. She has no idea who this man is or whatever. I think she finds out his name, but she falls in love with him and decides that she's gonna marry this man, although they don't know each other at all. And then the story just unravels from there. And oh my god. All the feelings, people. Oh my god. I cried and I cried and I cried. I mean, one like caveat is that I am going through perimenopause, so I don't need a lot to make me cry. But oh my god, that book, I was just like sobbing and like it was crazy, man. Oh my goodness. And it is not an easy read, because when you're getting her story from childhood and onwards, and it's horrific. It's a horrific story. Like, the things that she has gone through in her life are horrific. So yeah, anyway, and the heartache, I think, of Eleanor, and then when you kind of, because she's not necessarily a very sympathetic person to begin with. She's very like, but then when you start to learn about her story, you can just, oh my god, it was, anyway. And when you kind of realize really what happened, you are really deep in the story, and it's devastating. Oh my god, it was so emotionally demanding to read this book. And it's been like 4 months since I read it. And oh my God, I'm still thinking about it. And when I talk about it with people, like, you have to read this book. I'm like feeling almost emotional because it was such one of the best reading experiences of my life, I think. And if you would point a gun at me to tell me what was the best book that you read, this would probably be it. And I've read a lot of really good books. So anyway, I just couldn't put it down. Like, I read it as an audiobook. And often when I'm reading audiobooks, I will listen to them when I'm on the bus going to work or in the car or whatever. I couldn't do that with this one because I would be sobbing, in public. So anyway, oh my God. I mean, you have to be you have to know that it's going to be a hard read, but it's 100% worth it, and I 100% recommend it if you can handle it. So, those were my favorite books of 2023. I would really love to hear in the comments if you have read any of these books and what you thought, if you agree with my kind of view on them and my kind of review. But also if you maybe think that these books could be something that you would be interested in reading. I would love to hear. Let's have a chat in the comments. Talk about books, people. So I love doing that. So I hope that you enjoyed, and thank you for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye bye.